some big news on Wednesday with Michigan's NIL. They signed a partnership with Altius Sports Partners and also furthered their existing partnership with Learfield. But my biggest takeaway from it is the executive general manager position with Altius that's going to come in. They're a consulting firm, I guess you could say, on NIL, working with a few dozen college athletic departments, consulting, giving them best practices, giving them their advice. And there's an executive GM position that's going to be coming into Michigan where he's going to work within the athletic department, be a employee of Altius. And to me, with that position specifically, I understand if you're an athletic department employee, if you're Ward Manuel of the athletic department, like you want NIL to be good, you need that to be good, but you also do have to look out for the bottom line and everything else in development. But to have somebody in there whose agenda is NIL and, hey, this is what you could do to do NIL better. That guy's not going to be making the decisions necessarily, but he can make those recommendations, give them all the facts of what the reality is. So I think that's a nice step for Michigan in the NIL space.
And finding NIL opportunities for kids. We were talking about one of my buddies who was up at Northwestern and watching how they did it on the basketball side of things. And, everybody thought, hey, Northwestern, if you want to poach some kids, go to Northwestern. They're probably, not getting anything. Well, Altius was one of the reasons that some of their bigger kids stuck around. Excuse me. And it's been a long time coming at Michigan. First, it was supposed to be out west, William Morris Endeavor, and that didn't pan out. They were supposed to be a pioneer there, and for whatever reason, that didn't work. But Altius has been around now for a while, and Michigan's been in the works with them for a while. Better late than never, I would say. But the bigger news was that Champion Circle is really starting to get the donations here. A couple of really big ones from anonymous donors that are getting them up to where they need to be to not only retain their roster, which is something that Sharon Moore is going to need. He's going to have to hit the ground running here, and he needs his players on board, especially after losing guys like Ben Herbert and that. There were some kids that were questioning whether or not they were coming back. And then to go out into the portal and find some pieces that could make this team really, really good, Clay. I understand. And people keep telling me, well, you don't lose that kind of talent and 18 guys to the NFL combine and come back and have a good year. You can have a good year. There's nothing that says with the talent returning that you can't have a good year. There's a lot of really good talent on this football team. Are they going to be national championship contenders? Probably not. And that's okay, but you can make it playoff. You can sneak in a 12-team playoff, in my opinion, if you find a quarterback. So that's big news. I love that. I love seeing that because, again, they've been playing catch up here, which should never happen at a place like Michigan. But to finally get that is good news.
Yeah, and I do want to make it clear that my my donations that I made were anonymous. So
right, exactly. Clay, I was trying to protect your identity here. Okay, so I did the best I could, but did you see me winking at you and stuff?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So no, I mean
that multi-million-dollar donation, Clay.
Right. Yeah. But it's huge that Champion Circle has kind of continued their momentum, and you got to give them a lot of credit for the efforts that they've had. And Santa Ono going around and Ward Manuel during Michigan's championship run as well in Los Angeles and Houston and capitalizing on that. You have to keep it going because you have this amount of money for this season. Well, next year you kind of need the next amount. I remember we were talking to a former Ohio State player last summer, and he was talking about donor fatigue with NIL, and that was last summer. Now, obviously, Ohio State got desperate. They lost to Michigan, and they don't have that donor fatigue anymore. 3 times. And so they maybe don't have it anymore. But as we're seeing on the basketball side, and one of the points you made in a column a week or two ago was, okay, well, if Juwan Howard stays, is that going to be exciting enough for the donors to get in line and donate for NIL? And I'm not saying that the same thing is going to happen to Michigan football that's happening with Michigan basketball, but basically my point is, great job. They're doing good work. They're getting traction here, but it has to continue for years and years and years. But in the short term, if you can get some guys out of the transfer portal, if you can keep these guys on the current roster, there's enough talent. It's one thing if you lose 18 guys who could be picked off of an 8-4 team. Like, even in 2016, that was a great team and they had a lot of talent. I think then they set the Michigan record with 11 draft picks the next spring. But that was 11 draft picks off of a team that was 10-3, and again, they could have been better, as we mentioned at the top. But this is 18 guys off of a national championship team that was really deep as hell. They have a ton of talent on defense left. So you need to get this done in the short term to keep everybody, get some transfers. You also need to get it done in the long term, and it seems like they're on their way to doing that.
They did that finally, right? And it got dicey when Ben Herbert left, and these kids got together and were walking out of that room, and some of them were literally in tears and talking about their next moves, according to some of the families that we've spoken with. And each one of those adds up, right? When you lose your position coach, you lose your head coach, you lose your strength coach, you lose your coordinator. Right. So keeping these guys on defense, to me, is really a testament to these guys, A, believe in the culture at Michigan, and B, believe in Sharon Moore. Maybe not in that order, right? Everybody I've talked to loves Sharon Moore. And it's going to be very interesting to see how he proceeds here as his own coach, instead of, being in Jim Harbaugh's shadow. But he was basically the anointed one, right? That Jim Harbaugh, and I trust Jim Harbaugh's judgment, as I know you do, Clay. Okay, this guy is ready for this, but we're going to find out. And it's not as simple as somebody saying, okay, this guy's ready to be a head coach. And I'll give Juwan Howard as an example, right? A lot of people thought, okay, well, this just makes sense. He's been an assistant coach, but he's never run a college program. And that's one thing to his credit that he recognized. And he went out and got Phil Martelli as his right-hand man, worked for a couple of years, or at least a year, and now we're kind of seeing a regression there. So, but I trust that Sharon Moore is going to be, if he has the NIL behind him, he's going to be a great young recruiter and an aggressive recruiter. He's one of the best guys I've ever met in this business. And that's not hyperbole. This guy is just a really good, down to earth person. I hope it stays that way. We hope to, have the same kind of relationship we've always had with him. And I don't expect that to change because he's such a good person, from what we understand. So, but it is different running your own program than filling in or being an offensive coordinator. And he's kind of found that out, having to replace a bunch of coaches. But to his credit, he went out and got what looks like a pretty darn good staff. Got maybe one more spot to fill. We'll see. But he's not Jim Harbaugh. And the sooner that people come to grips with that, I think the sooner, there are high expectations of him, but expecting him to win at an unprecedented level like Jim Harbaugh did in 3 years, to me, is unfair.
Especially right away. I think it was going to be tough even for a Jim Harbaugh-led Michigan team to follow up a national championship this year, or make it back to the title game or what have you, especially with the added competition in the Big Ten and Michigan's challenging schedule.